Welcome to Mindful Business, weekly discussions about mindfulness, entrepreneurship, and Web3. This live Twitter space is about an hour long. It's recorded and uploaded to YouTube to be played back anytime in podcast format. This is episode 26, dedicated to discussing self-love is self-care. And I am joined by my lovely co-host, Abby, the creator of Elevate, as usual. How you doing today, Abby?
My friend, I'm happy to sit down and talk with you tonight. I've been a little bit under the weather today. I didn't feel well at all yesterday, a little under the weather today, but I've been taking it really easy, giving myself lots of self care. And so I'm really excited to dive into our conversation today. This is such a laid back way to wrap up a day. So I'm always excited to sit down with you. How are you feeling today, Sierra?
Wow, I am so sorry to hear that, and I certainly hope you feel better very soon. Perhaps you partied too hard for your birthday over the weekend, and now you're just catching up. But I've been running around all day today. I decided to do a little afternoon yoga session. Usually I do my yoga at midday or in the morning, and I switched it up and did like a 4:30 class today, and I am just feeling so beat. Um, so I feel you. I am low energy as well. But I'm happy to connect with you and happy to have our weekly reunion. So, as you know, we're approaching Valentine's Day, which is a time typically focused on couples and celebrating our relationships. But I wanted to talk about self love this week because it's easy to get caught up in all the Valentine's Day mumbo jumbo, but it's important to also celebrate yourself. And, self love is not selfish. So let's get into it. And what I love about self love is it means so many things to so many people. So I'm curious, Abby, how do you personally define self-love? When you think about self-love, what associations and words kind of come to mind?
I love this conversation so much. And I think it's important to have because I do think sometimes there's some confusion. Sometimes people think maybe, oh, it's selfish to think of myself, or oh, self-love, maybe that's selfish or egotistical or something. And I really think real love of any kind, whether it be for others or for ourselves, is the absence of ego, first of all. And self love is necessary, right? I know we've heard the expression before, but I think of that visualization about, when the airplane is going down, you better put that mask on yourself first if you are going to be able to be of assistance to anyone around you. Yeah. And so not in such extreme ways, maybe, but I do think we have to be able to nourish ourselves. When I think of self love, I think of nourishment. I think of filling my own cup and checking in with myself and checking in with myself to see what are the needs of my body and my mind and my spirit in this moment, and how can I honor those needs. And if I do that more and more, I quite as a natural extension, almost as a symptom of loving myself well, I am that much more able to be fully present, and really pour that same loving kindness and energy into others, which I think is our natural tendency, right? As nurturing women, we tend to love on everybody else. What about you? How do you define self love?
Wow. I love that you use the word nourishment. Yeah, self-love is very nourishing. And yeah, it's not selfish. There's definitely a balance, everything in life, everything in moderation, right? There's definitely a balance between what we do for ourselves and others. And, I'm not suggesting like neglect all your life responsibilities and tell everyone else, screw you, I'm doing me today. That, that's like in the deep end. So I do think finding a balance is important. But I love that you mentioned filling your own cup and, this kind of self audit of checking in with your personal needs. Absolutely. There is something I don't want to use the word sacrificial, but I can't think of a better word. There's something sacrificial about being a woman, even when you just think about the whole process of, the experience associated with childbirth and the joy and pain. Like, there is something sacrificial about being a woman, and it is in our nature to do so much for for those around us, whether it's our families, our partners, our parents, our kids. So yes, goodness, I'm loving this. So when I think of self-love, I think of something that comes to mind that we talked about at length in another podcast episode is boundaries. As I get older, I realize more and more that self-love also means setting boundaries for yourself and others, and really like making it known how you need to be supported and loved, and not expecting other people to kind of connect the dots and figure it out. Loving yourself is vocalizing to other people what you need, because that sets you up for success. So boundaries come to mind. So the self-acceptance comes to mind. I mean, this is something we all struggle with in different ways. Just being okay with yourself as you are, not always looking for that one thing, like, oh no, like when I lose that 5 pounds, I'm gonna love myself, or when I dye my roots, I'm gonna love myself, or after I get this manicure, I'm gonna love myself. It's like this whole process of just like radically accepting yourself. Self acceptance comes to mind, even when you're not meeting your own expectations, just being okay with yourself as you are. And then I guess the last thing that comes to mind when I think of self love is just self talk and how that kind of factors into things. And I guess more particularly the importance of positive self talk and having an internal dialogue that's supportive and gentle and compassionate. It can be really hard for some of us to, this is not natural for some of us. I'm some of us. I'm a very like self-critical person, and like I have to dig deep sometimes to find those supportive, gentle, compassionate words that I need to give myself. So yeah, those are some things that come to mind. What do you think about that, Abby?
I love all of what you were saying. I want to go back. I love that you brought up boundaries and how, I think at certain points in our lives, maybe before we really find our voices, we maybe do tend to like hope other people will connect the dots, right? They'll pick up those context clues that we think we're giving. So I love that you said, being clear about your boundaries, and it made me think of the word, advocating for yourself. I think often we advocate for others, and maybe don't always advocate for ourselves because of a lot of reasons. But I think it boils down to loving ourselves. When we love ourselves in the way that we love others in the same way, then we are more apt to advocate for our needs to be heard and met. So I loved that you brought up boundaries, and also about not reaching, so much, and kind of really, I love that you said audit, like, where am I in this moment? And how can I not reach back into the past and grasp towards the future, not wait for the perfect scenario? Love that because, right, the present moment is all that we have. And if we're not feeling like worthy in this moment, then we're always going to be reaching back or forward. And so I do think, it reminds, there's a mantra, and the mantra translates into basically finding fullness. It's perfect. Some people use the word perfection, but that didn't really resonate. And so my teacher Manji Joyce said fullness, finding fullness in the moment, being content with where I am. And I think a self love practice can help us find that contentment in the moment. Um, when you were talking about redirecting self talk too, and how difficult that can be, I think having like little scripts sometimes, like, cause same, I classically growing up, I wasn't going to let someone say some shit about me. I was going to say it first. I would, jokingly, and I still catch myself once in a while, jokingly like, oh, I'd rather kind of point out my fault in a funny way. as a self-defense mechanism before someone else can say it, right? Acknowledging those things. And so just being aware that those happen, and when they're challenging, like having little post-it notes or on your phone, or now they even have affirmation apps, if you have trouble redirecting that self-talk, I think having little tools to help you do that can be so helpful as well. I think about, as we're talking about this, it reminded me too, not just our thoughts but our actions, right? How can our actions be supportive of really and truly loving ourselves and giving ourselves like attention and care, slowing down, and really loving on ourselves, acknowledging and honoring ourselves. We talked about what I said earlier. What are my needs in this moment? It reminded me. I know I've mentioned the book more than once, but Neurosculpting by Lisa Weinberger. She talks about going to like a bathhouse, like a Russian bathhouse or a hot spring bathhouse, and watching these women in this spa setting, this communal spa setting, taking hot baths and multiple hydrotherapy things, but that they would it was like a ritual in that they would scrub every inch of their bodies with such care, their elbows, their shoulders, every single toe. And she was kind of in awe of how much time each woman seemed to dedicate to this practice of what seemed like almost too much. How normally we get in, we do the thing, we get out, we're busy, we're distracted. But she took this observation and started doing this mindful practice there at the bathhouse, but also in her own shower, of lovingly, cleansing and scrubbing each toe, each finger, every part of her body, and going through that with some affirmations. And I've that stuck with me and struck me so deeply. It's certainly not something I do every day, but once in a while, and a lot lately, I've been trying to do little things like Epsom soak salts and Epsom salt soaks. I think I said that backwards. But little acts that almost feel like ritual, of where all my focus and attention is me in that moment and how I can care for myself. Do you have any like physical rituals that you do? I mean, I know we've talked about yoga and meditation and things like that, but other things that kind of just really anoint you yourself with that loving kindness, that self-love?
So much good stuff to talk about tonight. You mentioned so many good things. So, yes, everything can be infused with mindfulness and love, and even a bath can become a self-love ritual. So, yes, I wish I took more baths. And now that you're saying it, it's like, oh, yeah, there's just something so nourishing. That word keeps coming back to me now that you mention it, about a nice bath. You also mentioned advocating for ourselves, and I'm big on that. Like, we need to be our own protector. We need to be our own spokesperson, and self love has a lot to do with taking initiative and claiming personal responsibility for our experience. So, yes, there are so many dimensions to this. And, you also mentioned kind of how being self depreciating can kind of be like a self defense mechanism, and it's kind of how we can kind of refuse to give ourselves grace and just allow ourselves to fall short sometimes. And yeah, self love has a lot to do with accepting harsh realities at times, which can be difficult. But yes, love the question about personal self love practices and rituals. Um, yeah, I try to do nice and loving things for myself. And what I love about this is, like, this is different for every person. I own a crystal store, and I'm constantly taking pictures of crystals, my hands holding them. And over this last 4 years with Good Juju, having my nails done has become quite important because I'm always taking pictures of my hands. And not that you need to have your nails done if you're taking pictures of your hands, but there's something about, when you're photographing your hands, it's like you become very, very conscious of like, okay, are my cuticles moisturized? How are things looking? Getting my nails done is one of my kind of monthly self care rituals and self love practices that just is like something I do for myself. Like, I'm not doing it because I want other people to look at my nails and be like, oh, they're so great. Like, it's literally something that just makes me feel good, makes me feel more confident as I'm doing the work I need to do for good juju. And is just like something for me. And that time, it's once a month. It's probably about a 2 hour appointment to get my manicure and my pedicure. And it's just like time I love. The massage chairs going, like, it is a great experience. Some other things, showing up for myself even when it's hard. So that kind of looks like trying to commit to my exercise and yoga routine, doing things regularly for myself that I know are good for me. So, like, this is for me, this is like making my green smoothie every day. Like, I have this ritual of like, it's kale and like bananas and ice and blueberries and coconut water. And like, I've been doing this smoothie every day for years. And it's a part of my self care routine. I feel good. Staying hydrated. It's like simple things like this is like, showing up for myself in the ways that I need to like physically feel okay in my body. Um, and then more recently, really working on forgiving myself for mistakes instead of dragging myself. And, as we kind of mentioned, just trying to be mindful of my inner voice and the things that I'm telling myself about myself. You trying to not let my insecurities run the show, and thinking, what would I say to a friend? Because what we would say to a friend is never what we say to ourselves. We say the craziest stuff to ourselves, but what we would say to a friend is oftentimes what we need to hear. So, what about you, Abby? Other than your nourishing Epsom salt baths, what are some rituals and practices that you have that kind of are critical for your own self love?
Hearing you talk about pedicures, I once upon a time I was really good about that, but it's been honestly since pre-pandemic that I was really have really been in. I've had it done here and there, but real ritual of like routine, getting into it. I really need to get back to it. Hearing you talk about it, I love that. And I love that your nails are always done. They always look great in your ads. And I think that's such a great, it's like a win-win. I mean, it's perfect for, what you're doing in your business. And it's also a way that makes you feel good and it gives you time for yourself. It doesn't necessarily have to be nails, but just taking me time, making sure I am doing something. Now that my kids are teenagers, that's a lot easier than it once upon a time was. But I had to be really intentional about it when they were little. Especially, yeah, those early baby toddler years, it can be like boot camp for moms. And so I think that's probably when I was better at like going for pedicures because that would kind of be a 1 hour I could get away. X could keep the kids. I could go and do that thing. But now taking time for myself sometimes looks different. Honestly, I never was a shopper for myself ever, especially when those kids were little. Just never really was. I lived in yoga clothes. We sold yoga clothes at the studio. We'd get stuff in. I'd get my half price discount of whatever, and I never really like just didn't really shop for myself. And I have to say, now once a month I might buy myself a new pretty dress. It's not probably more than 30 or $40, but it's still like a little something that I now do for myself that I never used to do. And now that I have teenage girls, like they make that fun. I never used to enjoy shopping so much, but now like either to go with them or shop online with them and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, get that, mom." That's been kind of a new fun way of like treating myself to just something little that brightens my day that feels like it's just for me. As I said, when kids were little, it was really hard to feel to give myself permission. And that's really what it ends up being. I'd want someone else to validate, like, is this okay? Should I do this? Well, husbands are always going to be like, no, don't spend the money. So you can't really wait for other people to like grant you permission to take care of yourself or to put yourself first sometimes or to do something nice for yourself. You have to give yourself permission to be at the top of your list on a certain day or given day or whatever it might be. And so that's been my practice in these last few years is learning to give myself permission to absolutely do something nice for myself. And so buying a little dress here and there once upon a time or like a cute pair of shoes or something has come up. You talked about having some routine. My biggest routine, simple things. You said it could be simple things. My sleep schedule is something I'm pretty committed to once in a blue moon. And yes, I didn't party this weekend, but I didn't get a lot of sleep this weekend. We'll just put it that way. I had a lovely weekend. And so, but if I don't have like my normal set of rest during my resting hours, it does throw me off a little bit, but sometimes it's a fair trade. And one other thing that you said, I can't remember what it was that you said, but I put in my notes that I wanted to circle back to. Glennon Doyle, I know I've talked about her book Untamed before, but she mentions in that book that like somewhere along the way we all decided that the like absolute epitome of being a woman, like the pinnacle of being a woman is to become selfless, to absolutely every bit of yourself away to make everybody else's life so much better, so much easier, so great. Like that's what makes you, praiseworthy as a woman is to completely stamp out your own identity and self. And reading that book in 2020, man, that really struck a chord in me. And I think that's part of what has helped give me that shift into not being so selfless. I mean, of course, I think there's something great about being an altruistic person, being a giving person, loving and kind person, taking care of other people's needs. But if we are always giving, 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 and never bringing that nourishment back to our own cups, then we will be some depleted ass, grumpy, dragon ass, no energy. Yeah, we got to fill our love cups, right?
Oh, yes. Keep the love cups full and overflowing. Yes, shopping for yourself and sleep are fantastic self-care rituals. I am big on my daily routine and my sleep routine, and my husband knows like he gets up earlier than me and he knows not to wake me up. He just leaves me there, and I love him so much for that because mama needs her extra hour or so. So yeah, shopping for yourself and sleep are amazing self-care. And absolutely giving yourself permission to be number one on your priority list sometimes is what self-care is all about, and self-love. And I feel like it's important to say like this can coexist with being giving and generous and doing for other people. And as I mentioned, it's not like a polarity of you're one or the other, like you're selfless or you're selfish. And it's just like, no, it's about finding that balance in terms of what works for you. um so yeah, self love, even though it's about ourself, it definitely impacts how we engage with other people and the relationships that we have with other people. And I guess what it boils down to is without taking care of yourself, you're really you're really not capable of taking care of others, I suppose. But something else that factors into it is when you love yourself, you're kind of setting the bar higher for other people, and you're really showing people how you expect to be treated by first treating yourself well. And I feel like this is really critical, because it isn't, even like I said, even though it is something you're doing for yourself, it has profound effects in your relationships and how you engage with other people. What do you think about that, Abby? How do you feel like self love has impacted kind of how you show up in your interactions with others?
This is a really good point and something we could really spend a lot of time unpacking. I think I like that you said we're really showing other people how we want to be treated and how to love us, by example. When we are loving ourselves, when we know what our core values are, for example, when we know what we will accept and what we will not accept, what we will put up with and what we will not put up with. Boundaries. You talked about it in the very beginning of the conversation. And it makes me think, and I know we've talked about those core values Brene Brown has talked about in past episodes, but those are the things I think about when we're showing up, um, loving ourselves because we have those boundaries in place. We're protecting our peace, and yeah, we're showing people, listen, I can love you, but I love myself enough that I'm this is how I'm going to show up in these environments. And if there's something that is going to disrupt my peace in this environment, then I can't be here in right? It could also be like, as we have this conversation, it makes me think about things like peer pressure, right? Or doing things that maybe you don't really want to do, right? If you are firm in your self love game and you are firm in your convictions about what your values are and what you will and will not do, then that stuff doesn't matter as much, right? Suddenly you don't feel pressured to like do what everybody else is doing if you know yourself and love yourself very well. If you're feeling a little wishy washy internally and maybe not feeling so strong in that game, and needing that validation and needing, that push from someone else or that recognition, and then I think we do tend to be more easily swayed into situations that we don't want to do, or and that could be something simple or complex. It could be as simple as going to a party we didn't want to go to, or an event that we didn't want to go and do, saying yes when we should be saying no, when we want to say no, and being easily swayed. I think all of these things are extensions of how tuned in to and how strong we're feeling with that self-love game. I think it really does. It ties into the boundaries that you talked about. What are your thoughts as we're having this conversation?
So much good stuff here. I'm really loving this one tonight. And I'm laughing because, random side note, before we had this before we had this Twitter space, my husband, he always asks me, he's like, "So what are you talking about tonight?" And I was like, self-love is self-care. And he was like, what are you, running out of things to talk about? That doesn't sound cool or fun. And I was just like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, this is a great thing. Like, it's going to be such a good conversation. And he almost psyched me out. So when I came in this space, I was like, is it going to be lame? But I am loving this conversation and super enjoying it. And so glad that I didn't let him deter me. Anyways, that aside, and I say that to lead into my next statement, which is self love helps you engage with others more confidently. I love myself enough to know I know what's best for mindful business. And I was able to confidently still have the self love space in the face of criticism and jokes. But yes, leading by example, living in alignment with our core values, protecting our peace and boundaries, all of these things are a part of self-care and self-love. And as I mentioned before, it does have a lot to do with taking initiative, being personally responsible for your own experience, advocating for yourself. Like, this all ties into it as well. So I'm just loving how many dimensions there are to self love and self care. Okay, so also too, like, the benefits of self love, as we've kind of started to get into, like, ripple outward, and it's not just good for you, it's good for the people around you, but it's so good for you. As I mentioned, it helps you become more confident. It improves your mental health because it kind of helps prevent burnout. When you have a self-care practice and ritual and you're really in tune with yourself, you kind of start to keep tabs on when burnout is approaching, and you can kind of turn the dial down before you get there. It increases your self-esteem. It naturally decreases your anxiety and stress because you're having this time to decompress and to care for yourself and to love on yourself. Goodness, it makes you more self-aware, helps you just connect deeper with yourself and better understand your individual needs. So it's just infinitely good for you. Like, and that's what's amazing is like, it's so good to love yourself. Like, like you're not hurting anybody to love yourself just a little more today than you did yesterday. Like, there, like, no people, animals, babies, nature, no one harmed or hurt in the process. Like, it's a win-win-win. What do you think, Abby? What are some benefits that you've kind of experienced from having a self-love ritual?
You literally cannot go wrong, as you said. There were no no beings of any kind harmed in the process of talking about self-love, including your husband, which cracks me up that he's like lame. Little does he know we can geek out on this kind of thing for days. So I think that's so funny. But yeah, it not only are we showing other people how we want to be treated, how we want to be loved, but we're also showing other people how to love themselves. Whether we are parents or mentors or friends or daughters or whatever it might be, we are stewards of this earth, right? And we are all here just walking each other home. And when someone goes first, right? Sometimes we need someone to go first. Sometimes we need someone to lead by example. And when you are in that space where you are loving yourself, and it just shows you glow differently when you are no longer really needing someone else's validation, or your self-worth isn't really dependent upon yeah, someone telling you about your worth or whatever it might be. When it really comes from the inside, and it's hard, right? This is a practice. We say these things, and it all sounds so beautiful, but it's really hard. Our brains are not reliable places sometimes. Our brains and that negative self-talk is deeply coded in our nervous system. A lot of those words our brain tells us aren't even our own words. They're words we heard somewhere along the way that someone handed to us and programmed into this thing that loops through our brains all the time. And so it takes a tremendous amount of work sometimes and effort to overcome that bullshit, that stream of bullshit consciousness that will lie to you every time you look in the mirror. It'll say shit that just isn't true, and so it's work to love yourself, but it's worth it. And the more you do, and the more we become affirmed in this practice and deeply rooted in this practice, and we come to it every day, just like brushing your teeth or taking a bath. None of it lasts. You can't just like really get committed to loving yourself today and think for the next 20 years it's just going to be this magic spring that wells up from inside of you. Maybe it does. And girl, tell me please what your secrets are if that's what happens for you. But most of us, are going to have to practice every single day. Part of that practice looks like surrounding yourself with other people who get it, who are also interested in the practice of self love, because they're going to be your hype people, right, in your circle, and reminding you to do that for yourself. And when we do it, that there's that ripple effect. Our children, our daughters, our friends start to think, yes, I'm going to give myself permission to love myself today. I see that glow. I want that glow. I can't get it in a bottle. You know, I think that's one of the biggest benefits that I can think of is that light just spreads, and then it ripples out, and it makes the world a more loving, kind, gentle place, a happier place, when we're all kind of putting loving kindness as a priority in our practices. So I think that's a huge benefit. Yeah, as I said, you just glow differently, you just walk differently. You start to realize, right, that whether we're having a good time or not, time is marching on. It is not waiting. It is not going to slow down and wait for us to have a good day, or that, to feel like we have all our ducks in a row, or like you had said earlier, that, we have the right look for that whatever. No, we all we have is this moment. And so if we can lean into a softer, as you said, I think earlier, grace, giving ourselves grace, lean into a softer, kinder set of eyes when we look at ourselves, lean into giving ourselves grace, loving on ourselves, because time is passing so quickly that the more we can be in that loving space, the more we can literally enjoy these brief moments before they're gone. So yes, those are some of the benefits I think about when I think about really tapping into self-love.
You can't go wrong, as you said, beautifully said. Yes, absolutely. Self love is this practice of like leading by example, and it really does, as you said, signal to others that it's okay for them to love themselves too. And yes, as you mentioned, so much of our negative self talk is habitual, and there are so many things that we pick up from the criticisms and judgments of others. And it's kind of sick how these things stick with us. Like it could be literally something from high school or elementary school. These things can kind of become hardwired in our brains, and it is this unlearning process. It's a lifelong process, as you said. It's a daily practice. It is showing up every day and deciding my wellness matters, my joy matters, my nourishment matters, and that's not always easy. So, yes. Yes to everything you said. You mentioned some resources and some books, kind of just like to help with self love, to help with this process of learning to love yourself. And you mentioned Brene Brown, and she has an amazing book on this topic specifically, called The Gifts of Imperfection. Let go of who you think you're supposed to be and embrace who you are. And this entire book is just about the process of exactly what the title says, learning to love yourself, and kind of finally believing that you're worthy of love and belonging. It's interesting how many of us want to experience love and belonging, but internally don't believe that we deserve it. And a lot of times that's the blocker. It's not that people aren't willing to show us love, it's not that we don't belong. It's that there's something, a tiny little voice somewhere inside of us that says, like, maybe I don't deserve it. Maybe I don't deserve love. Maybe I don't belong. So that's an incredible book. I love that one. And I love Louise Hay has a book called You Can Heal Your Life. And it's filled with great affirmations. It talks a lot. So, like, this is not for everybody because it does talk a lot about how limiting beliefs and ideas are often the cause of illness. And I believe this. I fully believe this, but I do feel that to a certain point, it can come off um, almost like dismissive of people with illnesses, and I don't want to overgeneralize and say that every physical illness that a person has is a result of their limiting beliefs and ideas, because I feel like that's ignorant. So I want to make that clarification because I feel like that's important. But at the same time, I do think it's a really worthwhile point, and I do completely believe that our limiting beliefs and ideas can have negative impacts on our health. Whether that is an illness or not, it looks different for everybody. So this book is interesting because she has lots of thoughts on how you can change your thinking, using lots of positive affirmations and things like that, and kind of ultimately improve the quality of your life, ideally. Um, So yeah, Abby, you mentioned Untamed, you mentioned neurosculpting. Are you familiar with these books that I just mentioned? And are there any other, resources or books that kind of come to mind in terms of this topic of self-love?
I love both of the books that you mentioned. I love the very first Brene Brown book I read was Gifts of Imperfection, and it's short and sweet and easy to get through. Most of her material tends to be. I was going to say pretty much anything she's written, but that is a great one. I think that's the book where she talks about permission to be human is granted, and I know she talks a lot in maybe subsequent books about shame, and really dealing with our shame. So huge Brene Brown fan, and I think it's been helpful in my own journey to really embracing self love as a daily practice. So love that, and I also love the Louise Hay book you mentioned, and I have to say that's a really it's been around a long time, so it's a pretty dated book, and so my guess is part of the tone of that book, it probably is not as modern as thinking is, and so I'm glad that you gave the caveat that you did, that it does tend to be one brush stroke, but it's very if you kind of, take that grain of salt with it when you read it and realize it was written in a different time with a different tone, but still very applicable when you think about, yeah, I love, healing your own life. Some really meaty, interesting, helpful things in there. Yes to Glennon Doyle. Yes to the neurosculpting. I'm trying to run through my mind and think if there are any other that really stand out. Yeah, in fact, I need to read Untamed again. I read it in 2020. And, after, I think I've mentioned this before, but that I gave up drinking in 2020 very quietly on July 6th, 2020. Just woke up one morning and decided it was a really heavy thing I had been carrying around a long time, and I just wanted to put it down and be done with it that day. And that was, a little over 2.5 years ago. But it was reading Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed, and her story and talking about her kind of relationship with alcohol and her choice to go alcohol free. Yeah, there were just a lot of things that really just lined up in that book about loving yourself, and yeah, I can't remember if you said you had read it or not, but if you haven't, I hope that you do soon because it is just that good. 100%.
I haven't yet, but you have mentioned it a couple times, and like I have a growing list. All of the yoga books that you mentioned in our yoga teacher training space, I have on my Amazon cart. Like I have just a whole library worth of books that I need to buy, and Untamed is definitely one of them. There are so many good ones. And the one thing I wanted to mention too is like not everyone absorbs information differently. Like, and that's why I love that we do these kind of podcasts, the Twitter space thing. For some people, you're not a reader, and you're gonna absorb your content by listening or by watching, or by doing and feeling it in your own body and taking different actions yourself. So if you're not a reader, there are so many different exercises that you can do to work on your self love. You don't have to read a self help book to figure it out. Something as simple as just like starting by writing down your successes. Like I was thinking about this today, and it's just like my journal is such a negative wasteland. Like I only write in my journal when everything in my life is fucked up and I need somewhere to vent and complain and be sad girl and just hate everything. And like I was looking through my journal writings and I was like, damn, this is like such emo girl vibes. Like so I've accomplished so much in this last few months, but I only ever keep track of like when I'm feeling crappy. Like why? So I am making in 2023, I am making a point of writing down more of my successes instead of when I'm just feeling crappy. Um, and writing myself love letters. This might sound cheesy to some people, but like writing myself a letter that's just like, girl, you're showing up and you're killing it and you're exactly the person that you wanted to be. And I'm proud of you and I love you. Because, like, for some, this is important. For some of us, it's like we're not hearing this from anyone or anywhere else. And that doesn't mean it's not true. And it's so important to say that. Like, just because someone else isn't saying it to you doesn't mean it's not true. It's okay to say it to yourself. That doesn't make it any less valid. Doesn't mean it's fake. So, like, yeah, if you're not going to write yourself a love letter, then, say some positive affirmations in the mirror, say something nice to yourself, celebrate your victories. Because I swear, it's sometimes it feels like nobody else is going to. Like, like me and Abby were saying, you have to be the example. You have to set the tone for how you want others to show up in your life. But yeah, give yourself a treat, invest in your hobbies, make time for fun. All of these things are self-care. What do you think, Abby? What are some things other than reading a self-help book that you think people can like tangibly do to like work on their self-love?
I love this. I am a huge fan of writing positive affirmations. Not I want this thing to be true, but I am this. I am that. As you talked about writing love letters to yourself, I think that's huge. I really do because when we really work on believing that for ourselves, we don't need it from anybody else anymore. And when we get it, it's just gravy on the biscuit, right? It's just icing on the cake. It's so cool. Awesome. It makes me feel good, but I don't need it. And so it's almost like, in video games there's the boss level, right? There's all these little levels leading up. This is like boss level stuff to really believe it for yourself, but we're not going to get there unless we write that shit down, and not write down what you want, because we don't want to chase, we want to attract, right? So I am powerful, I am healthy, I am wealthy, I am rich, I am that bitch, I've really taken to doing more of I am statements, and not just saying them but writing them down. And I like that, self-awareness is everything. I love that you've caught that you've done that. I used to use, some real pissy passwords. If I was angry, I would use some pissy passwords, like fuck so and so, right? And I've stopped doing that because our words have resonance and power, and whatever energy we put out into the world, it comes back in tidal waves our direction. And so, knowing that, I've made a real conscious effort to shift to much more positive, kind, loving, affirmative type of things that I write and put out into the world. Spell casting is called spell casting for a reason, right? Our words have such resonance, and so I'm glad that you caught yourself, and I'd love to hear that you're going to shift that, because yeah, otherwise that's just the energy we keep bringing in, right? And so, and we need a place to vent, we need a safe space to vent. I think it's important to do that, and to vent, but there has to be that balance, and there has to also be that recognition of what a fucking badass we are, and those things we wish someone else would see in us and say to us. We have to be able to look at ourselves and see that and say that to ourselves. I'm surprised you didn't mention this, because I know that it's something you do, and you have mentioned it before. You've been buying yourself flowers since before Miley Cyrus made it fun to do this year around Valentine's Day. And it inspires me to remember myself. I know that you've done it, and every now and then I think, I'm gonna get myself flowers. Sierra does that sometimes for herself. I'm gonna get myself flowers. It's that having a friend go first, having that friend that shines that example of doing something lovely for herself. When you see that, it reminds you, oh, yes, do that for your, don't wish someone would do that for you. Go fucking do it yourself. Nothing wrong with that, nothing keeping us from doing that. And the more we pour into ourselves, I feel like it makes other people kind of look up and go, oh, what's going on over there? Oh, that's cool. And then all of a sudden, maybe they want to do it too. Maybe they don't. It doesn't matter, because we don't need it. But again, when they do, gravy on the biscuit.
Gravy on the biscuit. Okay, F so and so being a password is killing me. I was over here dying. We need a pissy passwords episode because that is incredibly hilarious and just so ridiculous. It's like you got to be really upset with someone to make your password to something F this person's name. Like that's reckless. My God, I love that. But on that note, yes, our words have so much energy and so much power. And I love that you mentioned that yes, self-awareness is key and is critical. Yes, I've been buying myself flowers. You know, I was like many women, I think I was in the habit of just kind of waiting for my husband to, and he does on special occasions. But I decided every week is a special occasion, and I deserve to have something nice and fresh and beautiful in my space. And I'm not going to wait for someone else to facilitate that. I'm going to love myself enough to spend the $7 at the grocery store to buy whatever flowers are in season and put them in a little vase and put them next to my desk. And that's what I've been doing. But yes, absolutely. I'm also big on like journaling and writing, and of course using my crystals, using my crystals to set intentions and remind me of intentions. When I think about some of the crystals I like for self-love, I obviously think about the heart chakra, I think, which is all about loving and accepting ourselves, having an open heart, releasing resentment. I think about my greens and my pinks. I think about like rose quartz and kunzite and green aventurine and jade. Like those crystals are so nourishing to me and like just make me feel so full inside. But what about you, Abby? Are there any crystals that you like to jive with for your self-love practice, or any kind of, incense, things of that nature? I know you mentioned Epsom salt baths, which is lovely. But what do you think about crystals for self-love?
All the ones you hit on. I have to say, this is funny. I was really so bad at a self-love practice for so long that I literally could not physically hang on to a piece of rose quartz for many, many, many years. I would either give them away or I would get a rose quartz mala and it would break. Like it seemed to be nearly impossible for me to hang on to a piece. I finally have a couple pieces in the last year to 2 years, not really much longer than that, that I have finally come to realize that I need to be hanging on to that, not just giving it away. But it's just been an interesting relationship coming to understand that yes, I need the rose quartz too. I love moonstone. I love moonstone and bought myself a really special, beautiful moonstone bracelet over the summer when my heart was broken. And I don't know if I told you this story. There was this little girl who wanted this rose quartz and she was crying it was at the farmer's market. And the mom was like annoyed with the little girl and wasn't listening to her. And the mom was saying to the crystal dealer that she was trying to look for a stone that would help the kid with her behavior. And I was thinking, oh man. And it like broke my heart. And I wanted to buy the kid a rose quartz, but I'm realizing, mind your fucking business, Abby. It's none of your business. You can't go buying random children and strangers, things because they want them, and that's not not your place. That's the day I bought a little rose quartz. It's not even a nice one, but a little rose quartz for myself. I realized in that moment, you need to love yourself more, Abby. I bought that, but I also treated myself to this beautiful moonstone bracelet that I would normally not treat myself to. I would normally, it seemed like a gift. Like, you would buy that as a gift for someone, not for yourself. And it's faceted and it's lovely. And I wear that motherfucker every day. And I second guessed buying it for a moment, right? But when there's that, do I deserve this? Am I worthy of this? Yes, you fucking are. Yes, you fucking are. And so have more of those moments. I know that's not what you asked me, but yeah, Moonstone. Because of that story, Moonstone has really helped me this year in particular with self love. And I'm telling you, my favorite manifestation stone from Brazil that was curated for me by my good friend Sierra of Good Juju, lady, that has been my favorite go to stone for everything. But it's right next to my bed, and directed right at me, to remind me to love the shit out of myself. So yes, those are my three picks.
I love that. I'm so happy that you like your quartz crystal. I've mentioned this on past spaces, but curating for my friends and people close to me is something I really love. It brings me a lot of joy. I love crystal shopping for myself, but the feeling of like helping someone else find a special sentimental piece is like really fulfilling. And I'm going to the gem show this weekend. I'm flying out to Arizona to go to the Tucson Gem Show for Good Juju to get crystals for the store. And we're actually offering personal shopping to Juju Gallery NFT collectors. So that like if there's something we don't have on the site and something specific and personal that someone is looking for, like I'll go and hunt it down for them myself at the gem shows. So I'm really excited about that. Like it's not something I do often, but I'm hoping that this like opens more avenues to do it more frequently. And if anyone is listening and has one of our NFTs and wants me to shop for them, please let me know because I'm leaving tomorrow. And we're reaching the cutoff point. So just putting that out there. But I love Moonstone too. Moonstone, similar to Labradorite, has these beautiful flashes of color, usually like blue. And I just love when crystals have like kind of a color shift or an iridescence. Like I just find it so beautiful. And I feel like everyone has a rose quartz story. It's so sweet. And like whenever you talk to someone about crystals, rose quartz always, always, always comes up. I feel like it's like a lot of people's introduction to crystals or like their first crystal. When I first started dating my husband, I gave him a little rose quartz tumble. And boy, did that baby pack a punch. It was small but mighty. And I say that because whatever it's 5 years later at this point, but when he proposed to me on that day, he had it in his pocket, and after he put the ring on my finger and I was like, oh yes, I do, I will, he pulled it out and he was like, look what I have, and it was the little rose quartz tumble, and it was such a sweet moment. So yes, that little baby packed a punch. And rose quartz is just, I don't know, it just has such a like soothing, gentle, feminine kind of energy to it. So, yes, yes, yes. Goodness gracious, time flies when you're having fun. We are coming up on our hour. We talked about so much. We started by kind of personally defining self-love. We talked about some of our own practices and rituals that we both do as individuals. Talked about how self-love kind of impacts how you engage with other people. So many of the benefits of having a self-love ritual. Even got into some resources and books and exercises that people can do. So this was amazing. For anyone who joined late, this space is recorded, and it's also going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So it will live on forever and be immortalized, and you can play it back at any time. Before I kind of close up the space, is there anything else you want to add about self love, Abby?
Just that gentle reminder that it is a practice. And so to be patient and persistent, but it is well worth the pursuit. So I love that we had this conversation. I love the reminders. And I love you, my friend. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I always just feel so energized after our conversations.
Oh, I love talking to you every week. Yes, you mentioned patience and persistence, and coincidentally, we have another episode about patience and persistence, which are both key to developing a self love practice. This has been incredible. I love this conversation tonight. We do these spaces once a week. We usually do them midweek in the evening. So check our tweets for information about the next space. Thanks for hanging with us tonight. We had a nice little crowd. We appreciate y'all and hope to see you again. Sending lots of love and good juju out into the universe. And I'll see y'all soon. Bye.